Hello, my name is Luke. I make these kind of personal reflection videos around the lunar cycle. It was recently the flower moon, and so I'd like to spend some time contemplating what it is to bloom, to enter into one's own, to be self-possessed, to be an agent of transformation, and to undergo a process of growth from, you could say, seed to sapling into a flowering and a blossoming. And it's really something from a human perspective to try to consider that, because it really gets at the center of identity and sense of self and other. And in effect, what I'm trying to point out here is something that in my own life has been difficult to come to the realization of, that being that well-being is possible. It's been difficult to get to that realization because in many ways I've held myself back in life. I put myself under a lot of pressure, and a lot of stress has just come about by the fact that I don't allow myself to rest. And in some sense, I don't understand what rest would even look like, because I'm always, thinking about like things that could have been, about everything that I'm not, about what I still have to do. And I'm always measuring myself against my goals in a way that ensures that I feel like I'm always falling short. I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like nothing I do matters. And those are still internalized limiting beliefs that I'm still working through and trying to, first of all, kind of problematize and dig up and kind of perform the archaeological investigation necessary in order to, clean off these ancient relics, so to speak, and to really get at the source of what actually caused these limiting beliefs to become embedded in my body in the first place. How did it come to be? How did they originate in such a way that they become part of myself, and it feels like I'm losing a sense of who I am in recognizing that actually things don't have to be this way. Well-being is possible. And we could look at how that is reflective of my religious upbringing, original sin, fallen nature, that sort of, view of human life. But there's also, so much cultural expectation that comes along with it. And this is, in a sense, a kind of project that goes along with coming of age, the various rites of passage that exist in culture that ensure that we feel infantilized as children, and even as we become adult animals, we still feel a shame of ourselves in the sense of denying our inner child. But we also feel like when we do try to take control, that we don't really feel like we have the authority to act on our own behalf. It feels selfish to put ourselves first. It feels selfish to take an interest in one's life. And one of the things that I am trying to do in my journey on this planet is to feel at home. And that can be seen as a radical project, because it's a very basic religious belief in Christianity, at least, which is the religion I grew up with. It's a basic belief that this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. And that we live for after the grave, this kind of eternal heaven or eternal damnation, and that everything we do now, we're just passengers. This world is not my home. And so when you can look at civilization now as kind of the manifestation of what that looks like in practice, with the destruction of the planet and this kind of short-term gratification prioritized over any long-term sustainability. And so when we look at that, not from that macro lens, but from a micro lens into the, my day-to-day life, I am trying to begin the project of identifying not with just myself in the present moment, but with myself in the future. And in order to do that, I have to identify with myself in the past. And in order to do that, I need to escape these kind of rigid moral categories that restrict my ability to even conceptualize a future. One of the great human freedoms is that we are able to imagine something other than what is right in front of us, whether it's our improved memory compared to other primates or animals in the animal kingdom, or if it's our ability to simulate the future and kind of project into the unknown stuff that might happen. I mean, this is the very foundation of the scientific method, right? Hypothesis, experiment, observation, results, and so on and so forth. And it doesn't necessarily have to be viewed from the perspective of exploitation, although it can easily turn into that. As soon as you start instrumentalizing organic processes and trying to identify systems, it then becomes easier to dehumanize, to denaturalize. And, well, it kind of goes both ways, right? Because on the one hand, we don't want to naturalize the way things have been. We don't want to say that it's inevitable that history happened this way, or it's inevitable that I came to this point in my life. I had agency, I had choice, but in another sense, there is an element, a level of determination in which, well, maybe things could not have happened another way. And in a sense, it was meant to be. And whether this is, destiny or fatalism, there's that ongoing conversation between how much freedom do we really have. But the fact remains that I know that the limits of my imagination, the limits of what I can consider possible, are restricted in some sense by things outside of my control, and that those are prejudices, right? They're not really based on experience as much as they are coping mechanisms, or just these different machinations of mind in which I am restricting the conditions of possibility because it makes me feel, or I don't know any better. I do not know what I do. And in that sense, one of the things that I've been trying to get better at is, yes, just take an interest in my life and to really actually observe what happens. And this goes beyond mindfulness in the sense of, people tell you to meditate, people tell you to pay attention to your awareness, your attention is valuable, we live in an attention economy. Just realize how much wealth you have in that attention economy, given that you have control over in your attention. That's where the freedom's at. You have the ability to choose one's own way. You have the ability, the freedom to respond to any given situation in however you want. But the conditions of possibility are such that maybe you're not even able to imagine responding to it in a different way. And, well, is that a failure of imagination, or is that a fact of life? It's an interesting question. But in order to really introspect, it's not enough to just go deep within. We have to actually pay attention, as a matter of fact, to the very habits and externalizations present in our day-to-day existence. These banal platitudes of general life advice and common sense are such that we easily overlook them. But what's necessary in order to become who we truly are, to self-actualize, to flourish, to blossom, to bloom, what's necessary is the understanding that there is a material basis for our existence, right? Even if it's not reducible to mere physical objects, there's still a material basis for who we are. And ignoring that entails the adverse effects of sleep deprivation, improper diet, or not exercising, not getting enough sunlight. These things, while not completely the cause of mental illnesses. They certainly exacerbate the problem. They're kind of physiological, psychological amplifier, so that if you're taking care of your physical body, you're more likely to feel in good health than if you're not. But that externalization of the interior self is something that takes time to attune oneself to actually pay attention to what one is doing in life, and to view it with some kind of separation, to be able to look at the subjective experience in a so-called objective way, but actually listening and making changes based on that is quite a challenge. It's almost as if we just need to look and really sit with it. Our actions speak for themselves. If only we could listen, if only we would listen. It feels like for my entire life, I've been distracting myself, and I haven't really known from what. What am I avoiding? And of course, the question itself is interesting, because I'm, in effect, trying to turn my eyes back towards themselves and look in a way that, obviously, you can get that effect by looking in a mirror, or in my case right now, by looking into the camera and seeing myself projected on a screen. But that is just that. It's a projection. It's not that I'm seeing myself. I'm saying a representation of myself, and a mirror image. And there's that gap between what is seen and what is seeing, between the seer and the saw. So where do we go from here once we become aware of our condition and this kind of, I don't know, this mirror realm of reflection? Well, it's difficult to say, because much of the time how we respond to that is ignorance, and if we don't like what we see, we avoid it, and that perpetuates the cycle of might be shame, might be fear, might be doubt, might be all of these things mixed into one. It might be inexpressible, and in trying to express it, we're trying to capture something in words that will always exceed the ability to restrict that feeling of awareness in language. You know, it goes beyond, well, the scope of possibility. And so what I'm really talking about here is, if we can't capture it, but we keep bumping up against it, if we keep arriving at this point, if it feels like we always return to the same spot, that we're in a loop, that we're in this cycle of self-realization where we feel like we make progress but then fall back into old patterns, such as I do rather frequently, what we do then is relax, right? Rest. Actually rest. And what does it mean to take a break in today's world? What does it mean to enjoy life? What does it mean to take responsibility for one's own desire, so that our dreams become achievable? It's almost like then our fantasies become chores, in the sense that, well, if we admit that we have the ability to actualize them, well, it then becomes our responsibility to do that actualization, which takes work. It takes effort to do what I want. That is pain. It takes effort to achieve my desires. That hurts. It's a frustrating process. It takes time in energy, and the realization that we can get what we want is scary, because it then becomes our responsibility, right? We're taking back control, and in that taking back, we are admitting to ourselves that on some level we are not enough, right? Against like what we could be. But that's always going to be there, right? So we have to reconcile that feeling of, I know who I am and I'm content in myself. I'm happy with the way things are, but also I can imagine a better future, but that better future requires work on my part. And so I need to kind of balance the here and now versus the there and then. Then meaning could be the past, could be the future. Then, back then, when we get there, then things will be better. And so there's this detachment from the present moment, but we need to remain present in the present moment. Can you keep up with all the presents? We need to remain present, yet not ignore the past or avoid the future. And that, oh my goodness, isn't that such a difficult problem to approach? How do you even start with a problem that can't be put into words? It's a problem of embodiment, right? Of being grounded in oneself and seeing oneself as a process rather than a product, rather than essentializing our existence. We can see ourselves through a processification of becoming. We are temporal becomings, in the sense that we move through time and we change, and it's a fact that we are not who we are today. 5 years ago we were a different person, right? And 5 years from now we'll be a different person. But when we project into the future, it's easier. This is kind of a cognitive bias that's been studied, if I'm remembering this right. When we view like 5-10 years ago, we can easily recognize that we were a different person. But when we are asked to project 5-10 years in the future, we often answer will be more of the same. It's easy to admit that we've changed in the past. It's harder to admit that we'll change in the future. Why is that? Is it because we have an attachment to our current existence, and to admit that we change is an insecurity? It's turbulent, and it's kind of unsettling to see just how much this world is tenuous, is precarious, is precious. And if we can't be attached to ourselves now in that sense, how do we achieve a sense of embodiment? How do we achieve a sense of embodiment? Well, again, that's a big question, right? Because it takes us back into the present moment and really snaps into perspective what exactly it is we're getting at here. We're trying to achieve a sense of mental clarity. And in doing so, we almost have to detach ourselves from our current situation. Because in putting to words that which resists definition, we are, in effect, we're trying to contain something that is fundamentally excessive. It exceeds our attempts to get a grip with it. This idea that, ambition exceeds ability, let's say. Human touch exceeds our grasp. So where do we go from here? Well, I mentioned earlier that this is a problem, right? But what if we didn't view it that way. Maybe viewing it as a problem from the onset is a mistake that leads to many of these symptomatic responses. Maybe instead of viewing life as a problem, maybe instead of viewing ourselves as problems, as problems to be solved, instead, maybe we should view ourselves as wildernesses wanting to be explored. Maybe we should expand the meaning of what it means to be human. Maybe we should approach this with a sense of curiosity rather than prescriptive facts of life that really are unfounded in the sense that it's just prejudices. Like what would it take for us to view ourselves in a new light and see us for the possibilities rather than the prohibitions, instead of seeing us as fundamentally lacking? Instead, lay down the groundwork for a new, creative, productive sense of possibility, of potential, of limitless potential. Well, that's kind of scary in a way, because now we're getting at something that is undefinable, but it's not a problem per se. Excuse me. It's not a problem per se as much as it is a possibility. It's a prompt. And so the question becomes, well, what is the meaning of life? No, that question is asked of us, as the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl would say. Rather, that question is asked by us in life at every given moment, and it's our choices in life, our actions, that we may offer as a response to it. The answer to the meaning of life is not a verbal answer. No, it's what we do with our lives. And so in many ways, we've already given an answer to that by how we've responded to the situations that the world has given us already. In other words, returning back to the main point, I think, our actions speak for themselves. If only we would listen. If only we could listen. That interpretive process of understanding ourselves, extracting our beliefs from our behavior as if we already knew the answer, we were just ignorant of our knowledge. As soon as we start applying that in our lives, I think a world of possibility opens up. I think we're able to better embody our humanity in that way. What do you think? So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is not just me rambling per se. I mean, it's a conversation. If you have anything you'd like to add or question or respond to in the comments, that's wonderful. I love reading any interactions I am able to with the people on this channel. In my last video, I said I was going to do some different types of uploads. That didn't happen. I'm still figuring out the process of what it's like for me to share myself online. I don't know if you know, but this channel is pretty small, and I have big goals, but I mean, feed the ego, right? But there's a lot I'm still figuring out, and it's my ability to admit that, I think, that allows for growth to actually take place. And it's a long, arduous journey. It's a trial and error process. But anyway, I appreciate any feedback you have. Like if you like, consider subscribing. But with that out of the way, I'll just say, you know, stay hydrated, get enough sleep, eat, breathe. All that stuff goes a long way for us in the task of embodiment and feeling grounded in ourselves and becoming who we are. Like, you can't overlook the basics. The basics are, in many ways, the groundwork, the framework which allows for the more, you know, abstract ramblings that I've just done or tried to do. So yeah, hope you're doing well. Take care of yourself. Well-being is possible, and until the next video, take care.